I came home after a 10-day camping trip. It was raining lightly, and when I slid my key into the lock, it wouldn't turn. The lock had been changed. Confused, I called my son, but all I got was his cold response. Dad, this is for your own good. We sold the house. I just smiled and sat down on the porch steps. Then I sent my lawyer a brief message. They took the bait. Soon enough, I'd show them who really held the power. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which country or state you're tuning in from. A note before we continue, this story contains dramatized fictional elements to enhance the experience. Any similarities to specific individuals or locations are unintentional, but the lessons here are absolutely worth reflecting on. The key slid into the lock, but it wouldn't turn. I stood on the front porch of my house on Cedar Valley Road, my duffel bag at my feet, the December rain falling soft and steady. The smell of wet cedar hung in the air. I'd been gone 10 days, a camping trip up near the Cascade foothills with my old friend Frank, something we'd done every year since we both retired. I tried the key again. Nothing. The metal turned halfway and stopped, like it was meeting resistance from something that shouldn't be there. I stepped back and looked at the door. Same craftsman-style door I'd installed myself back in 1987. Same brass handle I'd replaced after Eleanor and I celebrated our 30th anniversary. But the lock was different. I pulled out my phone and called my son. Marcus picked up on the second ring. Dad, he said. There was something in his voice. You're back early. I'm standing on my porch, I said. My key doesn't work. There was a pause. Not long, just long enough to tell me something I already suspected. Dad, we need to talk, he said. Can you drive over to our place? In the background, I heard my daughter-in-law Jessica's voice, low and urgent, saying something I couldn't make out. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Whose lock is on my door? Another pause, longer this time. Dad, Marcus said finally, just stay there. We'll come to you. He hung up before I could respond. I walked back to my truck and sat with my hands on the steering wheel, watching the rain streak the windshield. I didn't turn on the engine. I just watched the clock and breathed. They would arrive in 37 minutes. I watched every one of those minutes pass. While I waited, I thought about who I was and how I'd gotten to this moment. My name is Robert Harrison. I turned 72 this past spring. I spent 28 years as an architect before retiring. At 61 designed commercial buildings, a few schools. Solid work that's still standing. I've lived in this house on Cedar Valley Road for 43 years. Eleanor and I bought it in 1982 for $78,000. It needed work, but it had good bones, and a basement I converted into my pottery studio. Eleanor passed away almost 3 years ago in spring 2023. When she was gone, I had the house appraised for the estate paperwork. The number came back $1.3 million. I'd always known property values in the Pacific Northwest had been climbing, but that was the first time I'd thought of my home as a number, instead of just the place where I'd raised my son and built my life. I didn't like that feeling. Marcus is 45 now. He lives 20 minutes from here with his wife Jessica and their 2 kids, my grandchildren 10 and 12. For most of his life, Marcus was a good son. Not particularly close, but he called on birthdays and showed up at Christmas. After Eleanor passed, Marcus started coming around more often. At first, I thought it was grief. I thought he was checking in on me the way a son should. Looking back now, sitting in my truck in the rain, I understand what was really happening. He wasn't checking in. He was assessing. They arrived right on schedule. Marcus's silver sedan pulled into the driveway. They looked nervous. They looked like 2 people who'd rehearsed what they were going to say but weren't sure if the script would hold. I knew something was wrong. I'd been preparing for this exact moment, because it had started small months ago in ways I almost didn't notice until it was too late. It had begun about 6 months after Eleanor passed. Small things at first. Questions that seemed reasonable, coming from a son who'd just lost his mother. Dad, are you eating properly? Have you been to the doctor lately? Let me clean those gutters for you. I appreciated it. I thought Marcus was stepping up, being present in a way he hadn't been before. But then the question shifted. Dad, this house is a lot for one person. 4 bedrooms, all those stairs. Have you thought about whether it still makes sense? He brought it up over Sunday dinner at his place, casual, like he was just floating an idea. Jessica's mother moved into a senior community in Bellevue last year, he said. She loves it. Her own apartment meals included activities. No more worrying about yard work or furnace or property taxes. I set down my fork. I'm not interested. I'm just saying you could take the equity out and live comfortably. Marcus, I said, I raised you in that house. Your mother planted those roses. My studio is downstairs. I'm 70 years old and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. He nodded. He backed off. 2 months later, he brought it up again. The pattern repeated itself 4 or 5 times over a year. Each time I said no, Marcus would let it rest, then circle back with a different angle. Once he brought Jessica. Once he showed up with printouts from retirement communities, full-color brochures with seniors playing bocce ball. And once sitting in my living room, he said something that landed differently. "Dad, what if you fell in the studio and nobody found you for days?" That conversation happened in early October. 3 weeks before Marcus said those words, I had fallen in my studio. I'd been lifting a 20-pound bag of clay onto the top shelf. My knee buckled. I went down backward into the stack of unopened clay bags instead of onto concrete. By luck, nothing broke. But my ribs were badly bruised. I lay there for about 25 minutes thinking about Eleanor, thinking about what came next. Eventually I got up. I didn't call anyone. I didn't tell anyone. So when Marcus mentioned the possibility of me falling in the studio when he said it, with such specific concern using that exact scenario, something cold settled in my chest. He couldn't have known. It was general worry. But the coincidence shook me. And once I was shaken, I started paying attention to things I'd only half noticed. Like the fact that a year ago Marcus had asked to be added to my bank account in case of emergency. I'd done it without much thought. Or that Jessica had asked where I kept important documents. My deed, my will, insurance papers. I'd shown her the filing cabinet upstairs, even gave her a spare house key the year before. Or that Marcus had mentioned 3 times now that he had a friend in real estate who specialized in estate transitions. None of it alarming on its own. But standing in my living room 3 weeks after lying, bruised on those clay bags, listening to my son describe the exact scenario I'd lived through, I felt something shift. All those small pieces, the bank account, the key, the documents, the real estate friend, the downsizing pressure, they suddenly fit together in a way that made my stomach tighten. Late October, on a Thursday evening, the thing that opened my eyes arrived in my mailbox. An envelope, plain white business size. Return address from a law office in Seattle I'd never heard of. I stood at the end of my driveway in the fading light and stared at that envelope before I carried it inside. Inside was a single page. I'd carried the envelope into the kitchen and set it on the table under the light. The paper was heavy stock, official, with a law firm's letterhead across the top. Kirkland & Associates, Seattle. I'd never heard of them. It was a summary of a power of attorney document. My name was on it. Marcus's name was listed as the designated attorney in fact. The effective date 3 weeks prior. October 7th. I had not signed any power of attorney. I sat at that table and read the page 4 times. Then I called my lawyer. Linda has been my attorney for 15 years. She handled Eleanor's estate, drafted my will. Sharp and direct, doesn't waste time. I called her at home. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Robert," she said, "what's happened?" I read her the letter, every word. She was quiet after I finished. "Then don't touch anything else in that house. Don't move those documents. And don't say anything to Marcus yet. Come see me first thing tomorrow, 8 o'clock. She hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark in the bed I'd shared with Eleanor for 40 years, listening to rain outside. I thought about my son, the boy I'd taught to use a level when he was 8, the young man who'd stood beside me at Eleanor's hospital bed those last 2 days. I thought about what it means to love someone and be betrayed by them, and whether those 2 things can exist in the same space. By the time the sky went gray outside, I'd made my decision. Linda's office is a converted Victorian on the north side. I got there at 7:45. She was already inside, legal pads covered in her handwriting spread across the table. She poured coffee and got straight to it. "The POA is forged," she said. "Signature looks like yours because it was copied from something you actually signed, probably old architectural drawings. The notary who validated it works out of a small office in Seattle. Someone willing to stamp documents for cash without questions." I set down my coffee. My hands were steady. "That's not all." She slid a document across the table. "A conditional sale agreement was filed on your house 4 weeks ago. Closing date mid-January. Sale price $1.28 million. $20,000 below market value. Quick sale." "My son sold my house," I said quietly. "While I was still living in it." Linda nodded. "That's exactly what happened." She laid out options. Police immediately. Confront Marcus. File emergency injunction. All on the table. "But Robert," she said, "if you move too fast, Marcus's lawyer will claim the POA is legitimate tie this up in court for a year. If you give me 8 weeks, I can build a case he can't argue out of. 8 weeks. One more thing, Linda said. I pulled your financial records. Marcus would have seen them through the bank account. The substantial donation you're planning from Eleanor's life insurance, the Conservation Trust? If he saw that it explains why his timeline accelerated. The $250,000 Eleanor's wish. I sat there looking at rain on the windows. Somewhere in town, my son was waking up, making breakfast, getting his kids ready for school, living his life while he waited for a closing date on a house that wasn't his. 8 weeks, I said. But you can't let him know that you know, Linda said. You have to act normal. Sunday dinners, phone calls, pretend nothing changed. It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. I can do that, I said. I wasn't sure if I believed it. That following Sunday came faster than I wanted. I sat across from Marcus at his kitchen table. Jessica set down pot roast that smelled like rosemary. My grandchildren, 10 and 12, were doing homework at the island. Normal. It all looked completely normal. Knowing what I knew required a focus I'd never needed before. I asked Marcus about work, let Jessica refill my coffee, help my grandson with fractions, laughed when my granddaughter showed me a drawing of our old golden retriever. When Marcus leaned back and said, Dad, with winter coming, maybe we should talk again about your living situation, I didn't shut him down like before. I set down my fork and nodded slowly. You know what, Marcus? Maybe you're right. We should talk soon. He looked surprised for a second. Then something else crossed his face that made my stomach go cold. He looked pleased, but not the kind of pleased you see when someone's relieved their father is finally seeing reason. It was anticipation. That was the moment I understood. Marcus hadn't been worried about me. He'd been waiting for the sale to close. I smiled and asked Jessica about her mother's place in Bellevue, and the conversation moved on like nothing had changed. But everything had. While I sat at Sunday dinners pretending nothing was wrong, Linda was working. She'd filed a court order, freezing any property transactions, submitted a formal complaint about the notary and Seattle law firm, obtained phone records showing 43 calls between Marcus the buyer's agent and Kirkland and Associates over 9 months. 43 calls, 9 months of planning. She'd also set up an ironclad living trust with her as trustee. Marcus couldn't touch anything. But I did something else during the second week of those 8 weeks. I went through Eleanor's things again. Her nightstand drawer, I'd avoided it since she passed. That Tuesday I sat on our bedroom floor and opened it. The journal was near the bottom, dark blue leather. I'd never read it before. The entry dated 2 weeks before she died, March 6th, 2023. Her handwriting shaky, but still hers. Told Marcus today to watch over his father when I'm gone. Not to smother him, Robert would hate that, but just to check in. Make sure he's not isolated. Marcus promised he'd look after him. I'm grateful Robert won't be alone. I read it 3 times, made a photocopy. Marcus had twisted her dying wish, taken words from a woman afraid her husband would be lonely, and turned them into justification for stealing his home. That same week I checked my filing cabinet more carefully. Behind my 2022 tax returns, I found medical records I hadn't known were there. Appointment summaries from 3 different clinics over 6 months. Cognitive assessments, memory evaluations, all with my name, all scheduled by family member Marcus Harrison on behalf of patient. None showed actual diagnosis. No doctor had declared me incompetent. But Marcus had been building a paper trail anyway, creating a medical history that didn't exist, making it look like I was declining, like I needed someone to make decisions for me. It wasn't just the house. It wasn't just money. He'd been trying to take my mind, my autonomy, my right to say no. I made another decision. I installed a small camera in my pottery studio, the kind that connects to your phone, saves to the cloud. Mounted it high near the kiln. When I told Linda, she asked if I was sure. I said yes. She confirmed it was legal, my property, my right to monitor it. What that camera captured over the following weeks was my son entering my pottery studio twice without telling me. Twice. I watched the footage alone in my basement studio door, locked phone in my hand. The first time Marcus entered, he spent about 20 minutes going through my filing boxes, the ones where I keep older documents. Receipts from projects built a decade ago. Warranty papers for tools I don't use anymore. He was methodical, careful. He put everything back almost exactly as he'd found it, but the camera caught the way his hands moved through those papers, searching for something specific. I watched it 3 times. Each time my chest felt tighter. The second entry happened 5 days later. This time he brought someone with him, a man I didn't recognize, maybe 40, wearing a dark jacket and khakis. They walked through the studio together, then up the basement stairs into the garage. The stranger took photographs on his phone, the workbench, the shelves, the pottery wheel Eleanor had given me for my 60th birthday. He was documenting the space, either an appraiser or the buyer himself, someone Marcus needed to see the property before the sale closed. I saved both videos to 3 different places, then I sent Linda copies. A few days later, my neighbor Helen stopped me while I was getting my mail. She's 75 lives, 2 doors down. I saw your son at your place last Tuesday, she said, casual friendly. I thought you'd given him a key to take care of something while you were out. That's right, I said. I didn't elaborate, but I made a mental note witness. If this ever went to court, Helen had seen Marcus entering my house without me there. The trap was ready. I just had to set it. The Thursday before I left for my camping trip, I made a point of mentioning it over dinner at Marcus's house. Jessica had made lasagna. The kids were upstairs. It was just the 3 of us at the table. I'm leaving Sunday morning, I said. Frank's picking me up. I'll be back on the 28th. Something flickered across Marcus's face. Not quite a smile. More like recognition. He knew I'd be gone. He knew the house would be empty. He knew this was his window. I called Linda on the 7th day of the trip. Cell service was spotty up near the mountains, but I found a place where it worked. I'm ready, she said when she picked up. We've got everything. If he moves, I said, you'll know. I'll know the second he files anything. And Robert, if he changes those locks before the closing date, that's illegal possession. That's evidence we can use. On the 8th day, her assistant sent me a text. Locks have been changed. The buyer's agent had done it, jumped the gun. But changing the locks before the sale was finalized, before I'd even been notified, that was a mistake. Linda had anticipated it. She'd filed the emergency injunction the afternoon before. I told Frank I needed to head back early. He didn't ask why. We've been friends for 35 years. He knows when to ask questions and when to just help you pack up the tent. We drove back in silence, the cascades disappearing behind us in the rearview mirror. When I stood in my driveway that late December afternoon, rain starting to fall again, and my key wouldn't turn in the lock. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't panicking. I was waiting. 37 minutes later, they arrived. If you're still watching, comment. A number 1 to 10 rating, how tense you think this confrontation will get. 1 being calm, 10 being explosive. One more thing. The scene ahead includes dramatized elements that may not reflect exact events. So if that bothers you, feel free to click away now. Marcus got out of the car first, hands in his jacket pockets, already talking before he reached the driveway. Jessica stepped out behind him. They both looked nervous, like 2 people who had rehearsed their lines but weren't sure the script would hold. Dad, listen, Marcus said quickly. I know this looks confusing, but this is for your own good. Jessica and I have been worried for months. The house is too much for one person. The studio downstairs is a hazard. We found a great place in Bellevue with Marcus, I said. Just his name. He stopped mid-sentence. Who is the buyer, I asked. Something flickered across his face. Dad, that's not really... Is it someone you know? Jessica touched his arm. Not comfort warning. Marcus looked at her, then back at me. Marcus, I said quietly. Think very carefully before you answer. Decide whether you want to have this conversation here in the driveway or in front of a judge. The silence that followed felt endless. The kind that carries everything about to change. Jessica started crying softly, hand over her mouth. I hadn't expected that. Marcus spoke quietly. Dad, I didn't. We were going to tell you. After the closing. We were going to set you up somewhere nice, take care of everything. With my money, I said. He didn't answer. With my house. The house your mother and I built our life in. Marcus slowly sat down on the curb in the drizzle like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. For a moment he looked less like a 45-year-old man and more like the boy who used to sit there after getting in trouble at school. I stayed standing. The doctor appointments, Marcus, I said. The cognitive assessments you arranged without telling me. 3 clinics in 6 months. You were building a paper trail to declare me incompetent. His eyes widened. Jessica turned to him. What, Marcus? What is he talking about? It wasn't like that, he stammered. You told me he was having memory problems, Jessica said. You said the doctor suggested we look at options. She stopped as realization spread across her face. I'm not having memory problems, Jessica, I said. Your husband tried to create a medical history that doesn't exist. I took a folded photocopy from my pocket. Your mother's journal, I told Marcus. 2 weeks before she died. About watching over me, not to take over, just to check in. Those were her words. Marcus said nothing. And the charitable fund? I continued. The donation from your mother's life insurance to the conservation trust she loved. That's when this became urgent for you. That money should have been family money, Marcus whispered. That money was mine to give, just like this house. I took a slow breath. Linda has filed everything the forged power of attorney, the unauthorized sale agreement, and the evidence of you entering this property without permission. Yes, Marcus, I have you on camera. The sale has been halted. The buyer has been notified. There will be an investigation. And depending on what they find, there may be criminal charges. Jessica sat beside him, crying steadily. I want you to go home, I said. Call a real lawyer. And understand that whatever happens next is the result of a choice you made. They eventually stood and walked back to their car without another word. I watched the taillights disappear. Then I called Linda. They were there, she asked. They were here. How do you feel? I looked at my front door, the lock I couldn't open with my own key. Like I need a locksmith, I said quietly in about 3 days of silence. The locksmith arrived within the hour that night. His name was Tom. He didn't ask questions, just changed the locks, handed me 3 new keys, and left me standing in my own house that finally felt like mine again. Linda filed the emergency injunction first thing the next morning. Then came the long wait. 6 months of investigation. 6 months of depositions where I answered the same questions in dozens of ways. Linda presented the documents I had helped gather while forensic accountants explained what Marcus had tried to hide. She walked me through every development. The forged power of attorney was traced to a Seattle law firm. Investigators discovered they had prepared similar documents for 4 other families across the Pacific Northwest, elderly property owners, recent widows, and widowers. The attorney who handled my case surrendered his license to the Washington State Bar rather than face a formal hearing. The notary was charged separately, a small-time operator working from a Belltown copy shop who was apparently willing to stamp anything for $200 cash. The buyer, a real estate investor. Marcus had met, through a business contact, cooperated with investigators in exchange for immunity. I watched his testimony from behind one-way glass. He confirmed Marcus had initiated everything and offered a below-market price to make the house easy to flip. Phone records Linda obtained showed 43 calls between Marcus, the buyer's agent, and the Seattle office over 7 months. 43 calls. Together they formed a pattern that was impossible to deny. The camera footage I captured Marcus entering my basement studio twice without permission was played during a pretrial hearing. I sat in the gallery and watched him move through my space on a courtroom screen, opening drawers and searching files. It felt worse seeing it in public than it had alone. Medical records showed Marcus's attempt to build a paper trail. 3 clinics, incomplete cognitive assessments. None showed any diagnosis because no legitimate doctor would declare someone incompetent without proper evaluation. But the pattern was clear. Then came the financial disclosure. A forensic accountant testified that Marcus had gambling debts totaling $380,000 online poker and sports betting on social media platforms. On top of that was a failed cryptocurrency investment costing another $95,000. Total hidden debt nearly $500,000. Selling my house would have netted Marcus roughly $520,000 after mortgage payoff and closing costs, just enough to erase everything. During the 3rd month, I received notice that Jessica had filed for legal separation, citing fraud and deception. She moved with the children to her parents' home near Bellingham. A week later, a handwritten letter arrived. She apologized, said Marcus had told her I was declining, that they were helping me transition. She wrote that she should have asked me directly. I read the letter twice and placed it in my desk drawer. I never replied. By the 4th month, prosecutors charged Marcus with fraud, over $5,000 attempted elder abuse forgery, and identity theft. His lawyer argued Marcus had acted out of concern for my well-being. Linda dismantled that argument piece by piece. Eleanor's journal entry disproved the claim he was honoring her wishes. Medical evidence showed I had no cognitive decline. Camera footage and phone records demonstrated planning. Financial records revealed the motive. There was no defense left. In the 5th month, Marcus accepted a plea agreement, pleading guilty to fraud and attempted elder abuse. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for early June. I would give a victim impact statement before the judge decided his sentence. Linda asked if I wanted help writing it. I told her I would write it myself. I sat in the courtroom on a clear June morning and listened as a judge sentenced my son. 18 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, $62,000 in restitution covering Linda's legal fees, the locksmith investigation costs, and the chain of expenses his actions had triggered. Then the judge added one final condition, a permanent injunction preventing Marcus from ever serving as a power of attorney or estate trustee in Washington state again. Marcus stood at the defense table in a gray suit, hands folded, head slightly bowed. I studied his face and realized how unfamiliar it felt. Either he had changed, or I had finally stopped looking away. The judge asked if I wished to address the court. I had spent the previous night at my kitchen table writing and rewriting the statement until the words felt honest. I stood, unfolded the paper, and read slowly. Your Honor, what my son attempted was not simply theft. It was the theft of autonomy, of dignity, of the life my late wife and I built together in that house over 43 years. He didn't just forge a document, he tried to erase my right to make decisions about my own life. He manipulated medical appointments, twisted his mother's final wishes, and planned it all while sitting at my dinner table. The hardest part is not the betrayal itself. It's realizing how long it was happening before I understood what I was seeing. I folded the paper and returned to my seat. The courtroom remained quiet except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. Marcus never turned around. After the hearing, Linda met me in the hallway outside the courtroom. She carried a leather folder and looked more exhausted than I had ever seen her. You did the right thing, she said quietly. Not just for yourself. That Seattle firm had 4 other families lined up. The notary had stamped dozens of questionable documents. By fighting this, you stopped something bigger. I nodded, though relief didn't arrive the way I expected. The house was still mine now, protected inside a living trust Linda had helped me establish. Months earlier, with safeguards Marcus could never touch again. But the rooms still felt emptier than they had even in the weeks after Eleanor passed away. One thing, however, felt right. 3 weeks after the sentencing, I met with the trustees of a new fund, the Eleanor Harrison Memorial Conservation Fund. It was financed with the $250,000 from Eleanor's life insurance policy, the same money Marcus had tried to redirect. The fund would protect flood-prone lands across the Pacific Northwest, quiet places most people overlook. The kind of landscapes Eleanor loved walking through and writing about in her journal during the final weeks of her life. It wasn't the legacy Marcus imagined, but it was the one she deserved. I haven't spoken to Marcus since that morning in June. I don't know if I ever will. Jessica sent another letter weeks later explaining that the children were struggling, but that she was trying to help them understand what had happened. She asked if she could bring them to visit someday when I was ready. I told her I would let her know. Some evenings I sit in the basement studio shaping clay bowls and vases I may never fire. The camera in the corner remains, though I turned it off months ago. The house on Cedar Valley Road is still mine. The lock works, the wheel turns, and Eleanor's name will last. That is enough. Marcus is in a federal facility 3 hours east of here. I haven't visited. I'm not sure I ever will. But my grandchildren still send drawings. They come through the mail slot. I had a wider one installed after everything was settled. I think Jessica allows it because she's a better person than the situation she was pulled into. She's trying to help the kids keep a connection with the grandfather they remember, even though their father made that connection nearly impossible. I keep the drawings on a shelf in the pottery studio downstairs, leaning against the wall near my workbench. I look at them while I work. Crayon trees, stick figure families, misspelled messages. We miss Grandpa. They're the hardest things to look at, and also the things I can't stop looking at. There are things I wish I had done differently. After Eleanor passed away, I wish I had talked to Marcus more openly about money, about the house, about my plans and my will. I wish I had explained the intention behind the insurance money. Silence left room for assumptions, and those assumptions grew into something uglier than they needed to be. I don't take responsibility for Marcus's choices. Those belong to him alone. But I understand now that grief and money, when they mix together, can lead people into decisions that surprise even themselves. Some of it might have been prevented if we had spoken honestly and more often. Last November, I finished a large pottery vase. It was coil-built from clay Eleanor had bought 3 years earlier before she got sick. She found it at a craft fair and bought 20 pounds, because, as she said, the color is too perfect to leave behind. I left the bag unopened for 2 years after she died. Last summer, I finally opened it. The clay was still good. It took 3 months to build the vase, one layer at a time, letting each section dry before adding the next. I glazed it with Eleanor's favorite color, a soft blue, the shade of the sound, on a clear morning. It's solid now. The kind of object meant to outlast the person who made it. Eleanor would have loved it. The conservation fund carrying her name purchased its first piece of land in September, a 17-acre wetland corridor near the Snoqualmie River. It's the kind of quiet place Eleanor would have walked, slowly pointing out birds and plants along the path. I received the paperwork 2 weeks ago. I read it twice, then placed it in the same folder as her journal and the drawings from the kids. I don't know if I'll ever speak to Marcus again. Jessica wrote one more time in October, saying he was working in the facility kitchen and keeping to himself. She didn't ask me to visit. I didn't offer. Maybe one day someone will reach out. Maybe not. I've stopped trying to predict it. Frank still stops by once a month. We don't talk about Marcus. We talk about baseball, his daughter in Spokane, and the new coffee shop on Pine Street, charging $7 for a latte. Ordinary things. It helps. I've learned a few things from all this. Autonomy matters more than convenience. Silence can be as dangerous as a lie. You can love someone deeply and still need to protect yourself from them. Grief doesn't excuse cruelty, though it may explain part of it. And the hardest conversations are often the ones we postpone the longest. I'm still here on Cedar Valley Road in the house Eleanor and I built our life in. The pottery wheel turns, the kiln fires, the drawings remain on the shelf. Eleanor's fund protects land she'll never walk again. And somewhere 3 hours east, my son serves his sentence. That is enough. I've thought a lot about what I could have done differently, not to change Marcus's choices, but to prevent the silence that made them easier. Here's what I learned. Don't wait until after loss to have the hard conversations. Talk about money, wills, and your plans while you're still here. Silence creates space for assumptions, and assumptions can turn into something far worse. If something feels off, unauthorized access, change locks, forge documents. Trust that instinct and get help immediately. I don't know if God put Linda in my life at the right moment, or if it was luck, but asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Thank you for walking through this with me. What would you do in this situation? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If this resonated, consider subscribing for more stories. Quick note. While inspired by real elder financial abuse issues, some elements were dramatized for storytelling. If this isn't for you, explore other content that fits better. Protect your autonomy. Don't let silence do the damage that honesty could prevent.